In this video series, we will talk about data types in Excel. If you would like to follow along, please download the Excel workbook available in the link below. There are three types of data types in Excel: numbers, text, and formulas. Now you might be wondering, well, if you look at the formats, if you ever use Excel, you know that there's a bunch of different formats available to see. And you might think, well, that's a lot more than three different data types. Well, it turns out that all of these different data types that you see here are just really different variants of these three data types. And really, there's two data types because formulas usually evaluate into either a text or a numeric value. So let's dive into each of these different data types a little bit more. First, you have numbers. So numbers are what you would consider your normal counting numbers: 1, 2, 3, 4, 100, 2,000. Then you have your decimals: 0.5, 0.25%, which is also a decimal, 0.001. Then you have your currency, which is your dollars, which is very similar to accounting. It's just a slightly different format. And then you have your scientific notation: 1 times 10 to the 5th power, which is designated by this scientific notation here, 5.02 times 10 to the negative 5th power, and 9.23 times 10 to the 100th power. Those are all your normal counting numbers your normal numeric values that you probably would have seen at some point in one of your math classes in high school. Then you have dates. And you might think, well, dates aren't numbers. And if you come from a different programming language or any other type of software, usually dates are its own data type, but not in Excel. In Excel, dates are actually stored as numbers, and with number 1 being the date January 1st, 1900. So from January 1st, 1900, that is number 1. On January 2nd, 1900, that is number 2. And keep counting. January 3rd would be 1900 would be integer number 3, and so on and so forth, all the way to today, which is somewhere in the 43,000 range. Then you also have time. Time is stored as a decimal value. So time is broken up into a 24-hour period with a 0.5 or halfway point being 12 o'clock noon. So while dates and times look very different and are treated very different in Excel, they are actually just numeric values. We'll talk more about these in a later video. The second data type is text, also called labels. So text is everything that's really not a number or a formula. So text can be made up of strings, like a sentence. This is a string. Just simple words like the word amazing. Then you have a little bit trickier situation where you've got numbers that are actually formatted as text. So in this example here, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which are all numeric values. Now you might say, well, why isn't that a number? Well, you can format a number as a text value if you choose. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky, and where often people, when you get into things like if statements or logical statements or VLOOKUPs, gives people some problems when they say, well, my value is there, but Excel isn't recognizing the value. Well, Excel recognizes the text value, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as a very different value than the number 123,456. They're very different values. As an example, if I place this number here and I do a simple test for equality, Excel will not recognize these as equal. Now, how do I know which is which? Well, by default, usually numbers are aligned right, which you can see here. The 123,456 is aligned right. Text is usually, by default, aligned left. Now, this isn't always the case because you can manually manipulate it, and I can make this number align left, but by default, it is aligned right. The second way in which you can notice that this text value here is actually a text value is you see that little green arrow in the upper left-hand corner of the box. That's designating that there's something different about this cell, that it wants to give you a little bit of a warning. So if you scroll over this little warning sign, it'll tell you what exactly is wrong. It is saying this number in the cell is formatted as text or preceded by an apostrophe. This is Excel telling you that, hey, This is a number, but it's formatted as a text. So it's Excel's way of warning you that, hey, you might want to check this out and confirm that this is how you want this value formatted. Because if you don't format it properly, it could give you problems later on. Then you've got dates formatted as text. So you can have Saturday, September 17th, 2019, which looks like a date value, but it could potentially be formatted as a text. Unfortunately, there's no easy way to really determine if this value is a text or a date, but I will show you a trick on how to do this in a few moments. Lastly is special characters. Special characters are symbols such as the pi, alpha, not equal to, greater than, less than. These are all different special characters that are also recognized as text values in Excel. The last data type we're going to talk about are formulas. Formulas are mathematical equations which you can either perform a mathematical equation or which you can use one of the predefined functions in Excel, or you can write your own custom VBA formula. Now, as we mentioned earlier, formulas are usually evaluated to either a text value or a numeric value. So one of the most common functions in Excel is the sum function. You can evaluate the sum function as you can take the sum of 10 and 2 and hopefully everything works out correctly, you'll get the value of 12. Now, if you get the value of 12, that is an integer value. So even though this is a formula, the output of the formula is a numeric value. There are different Excel functions that also return text values. So while you're using the formula data type, it can actually output a text value, which is why really there are two different data types in Excel, text and numbers. Now in this case, I did format the examples as text so you can see that all formulas start with the equal sign. Every time you write a formula, every time you use one of the predefined functions in Excel, you'll always start with the equal sign. I formatted it as that so that you can actually see that as an example. However, when you are actually evaluating the formula, make sure that your data type up in this box here is listed as general. If it's not listed as general, you are going to see exactly what you see here. You'll see the equal 10 plus 2. So it will not return the value 12. It will say exactly equals 10 plus 2. So now to do a little bit of practice, we have some examples here, and our job is to identify whether it is a text or a number. Notice again, I left out formulas because as we said earlier, formulas typically evaluate into either a text or a numeric value. So in this example, we've got what looks like a date, 1/1/2019. Date is not one of my options. If I click in the orange box, I'll see that my only two options are text and number. So now we have to go back and remember that dates are actually recognized as a numeric value. So I'm going to choose number, and my result says that I got it correct. Second example, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, that looks like a number. Let me put down number. Great. How did I know that this wasn't a text value? Well, it is aligned left, and I said before, default, it's aligned right. Numeric values are aligned right. However, I said also you can change that to align left. So the second way you can test it is by looking for that green arrow. In this example, there is no green arrow in the upper left-hand corner. There's also a nifty function in Excel called isNumber, and it tells you that this checks whether a value is a number and returns true or false. So if I apply this function to this cell, that's another way in which I can check to make sure that this is really a number. My next example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it looks exactly like the last one. Now, why would I put the two examples, the exact same examples next to each other? Probably means that this isn't a number. So how do I know that it's not a number? Well, I can use the same isNumber approach and test whether this is a number or not, and it says false. So the second way, which we talked about earlier, is look for that little green arrow in the upper left-hand corner. It's saying that there's something wrong. It says that this is formatted as a text. Make sure that that's what you want. Well, since we saw that little green arrow, we can assume that it's not a number, which means that it would be a text. But how can I check to make sure that that's right? Well, just like there's an isNumber function, there's also an isText function. If I use the is text, click on my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Excel tells me that yes, this is a text value. Next result, we got 3.21 e, which means e times 10 to the 15th power. Well, that sounds very much like a number. There's no green arrow in the upper left-hand corner, so I am going to make the assumption that that's a numeric value. How do I know for sure? Again, I can check by using is number, and yep, I was correct. Next, 321456 e to the 10th. Now, it has an e in there, so at first glance, you might think that it's scientific notation because just like the example above, that also had an e. But again, Excel says, hey, this is a number, so Excel actually recognizes that this does look very similar to a scientific notation format. However, the format of this particular cell is actually text. And so as Excel is telling you that, hey, make sure that this is really what you want. So in this case, this is a text. Now we've got 12 practice problems. I will leave these for you to go about on your own. It will tell you the result if you got it right or wrong, and I will see you in the next video.